Online is the only way to be. Touch HD.
A couple weeks ago, my interest in cryptocurrency was reignited. I've been interested in the future of banking and commerce for a while now, and with major banks slowly going digital and newer banks are launching on digital-only platforms, I thought it was a good time to take another look at it. You know, I've been obsessed with cryptos for a while, since back in 2017 when the media was going crazy. You know, the idea of decentralized currency, peer-to-peer, bankless money is impossible to ignore. And now that the dust has settled from that media frenzy, we're starting to see cryptocurrency reemerge as a disruptive force, perhaps less disruptive than we imagined in 2017. And I'd imagine my first guest has reason to agree. He's a Rhodes and UNISA grad with qualifications in computer science and software engineering and a wealth of experience in web design, software engineering, and blockchain. He's also the co-founder and CEO of CentBee. Lauren Gamaroff, welcome to On The Grind.
Thanks very much for having me.
Now, let's hit the rewind button. Back in the mid-90s, you headed over to Rhodes and studied both music and computer science. I imagine that there was much less drive for students to study computer science back then compared to now, because the technology back then was in its comparative infancy. So what inspired the decision to study in that field?
Well, you know, the internet was just being born, and it was becoming something that the average person could use. When I went to Rhodes, it was 95, and you know, the people were starting to use email. Websites weren't really a thing because you know, Netscape and all that only sort of was coming out. Most people didn't look at the web as this exciting place where, you know, everything was possible. It was more like, here we have this interesting place to share information. And you know, I didn't go there because of the internet so much. I went there because I had an interest in music, and there was this new idea of computer generated music coming along, and I thought, this is it. You know, I want to be somebody who builds, you know, creates computer music, become some kind of sound engineer or something like that. So I decided to do both. Although I couldn't at that stage do a computer music course. So you know, being a classical guitarist, I actually went to Rhodes because there was a very famous classical guitarist teacher there.
I see.
And then I did another major, which was computer science. And then my idea was, you know, in years to come, I could somehow put the two together.
I see. Do you remember how big your computer science class was back then? I imagine it was relatively small.
Well, I think in those days, you know, computer science, everybody knew that if you wanted a great job or something, you should understand computers. And what had happened was there was always the first year, you know, that was a massive class, the biggest lecture theatre on the campus. Then second year it would drop off. You'd have about, you know, 20% remaining, and then by third year there was just a handful of computer science students.
I see. By the way, you mentioned that, you know, you had the music as the main goal. What was the kind of point at which you decided, okay, actually, you know, software engineering is more my wheelhouse these days?
Yeah, I think, you know, the more I got into it, especially because of the internet, I have to admit the internet, you know, at that stage became tremendously exciting because being able to code websites suddenly felt very empowering. You know, the ability now to, you know, at that stage I made all these little websites for my friends. You know, everybody had a little page and all these images and things that represented what they were. I started building these websites, and then suddenly, you know, every company was starting to want to have a website. It seemed complicated. Big companies like Nedbank would pay huge amounts of money to have a little simple static website. And that's when I just thought, well, this is really fun. This internet thing is great. And left Rhodes, came to Joburg, and started a company at an advertising company. And they were there starting to build websites for customers. But definitely the internet, I think, having left school at such a critical time when the internet was now being this thing that was taking over the world, you know, I got swept along in that. But being young and, you know, not really understanding much about business and so on, it was difficult to start a tech company. Although I did, you know, there was I co-founded a company just before 2000, and launched on this whole idea. I thought I was going to become the next Steve Jobs or something in those days. You know, that's who you aspired to be. And have never looked back.
I see. So, you start your career in web development. You developed web applications and online wagering software, among other things. Back then, did you have any idea of the impact that the digital revolution would have, particularly on banking and finance, for example?
Not banking and finance. I was never interested in banking and finance. It sounded extremely boring. I didn't do accounting or anything like that. But definitely in the way people interact and communicate with each other. The fact that you could now take an image, take a photo and share it, send a message instantly across the world. In those days, I know it sounds weird, but there was the guys who were in the computer science labs. We would stay up in the middle of the night and find chat channels, and be amazed that I could now talk to somebody at a university in Spain. I remember that one night I sat there and I found the student. He was online at the same time. And what time is it there? Is it dark? Is it winter? Here we are chatting. But you could see the power that the internet would have with this ability to instantly be in touch with somebody you love or someone new, across the world. And I think even today, kids, I guess, they grow up with this whole idea that you can have Skype. When I was a student, and this is not that long ago, the fact that you could look at someone and talk to them across the world, that was science fiction. And now that's just how it is. Everyone expects it to be on your phone. So the power that the internet would have on communication, definitely, that was no doubt. But finance, that was always a bank. The best you could imagine was that a bank would have a nice internet website. I think it's still today, people struggle to think of a finance system that's not governed and run by large banking entities. And a lot of the work I'm doing right now is trying to, in the same way I was trying to educate companies back in the 90s about why it's important to have a web presence. Now I'm doing exactly the same thing with companies, even finance companies, saying, look, here we have a new finance platform or infrastructure. It's not the scary place where drug dealers and so on can just do their thing. This could potentially revolutionize that whole space in the same way the internet revolutionized communication.
I see. So, before we get into Centbee, you're also founder and CEO of Banky Moon, which is focuses on blockchain-based solutions and consulting services. So, with your knowledge and experience, what pushed you to start your own company, I guess, for the second time? You mentioned that you did start one in the late 90s.
Yes, so Centbee is my third company. So I've been working as a software engineer now for about 20 years, and when I first heard about Bitcoin, it was about 2011, and I was building payment systems for an energy company. We were building smart grid vending systems so people could buy electricity. And we were struggling to find easy ways for people who don't have access to bank accounts or credit cards or debit cards to be able to buy electricity. Simple thing. And that's when I heard about Bitcoin, and I thought, this is really interesting. Maybe we could bring Bitcoin into this. But Bitcoin, for many years now, has been sort of tainted with that idea that came from Silk Road, which was that very famous dark marketplace. And everybody who, every grown-up, you can say, that looked at Bitcoin thought, well, this is just a tool for criminals. So trying to convince the companies that I was, at to do this, to employ it, was difficult. None of them were interested. And, I was excited about Bitcoin. And I thought, well, let me do this. Let me take another leap, try and do this full time and see if I can turn this into something. But Bitcoin was difficult as a proposition. I couldn't go to a company and say, let me put Bitcoin payments for you, enable them for you. So this notion that cryptocurrency was split into two different things. One is blockchain, which is the technology that makes it possible. And then you get the cryptocurrency, the Bitcoin. Now, Bitcoin is very politically incorrect. The whole idea is that it's this new kind of money that you don't need a bank for, or you don't need a central bank to issue. It's global and so on. That's quite a complex topic to try and create a company around. So instead I thought, let me focus on the technology blockchain and see if maybe we can I can create a business that helps people and companies use blockchain, leverage blockchain for their own whatever they want. And that was a lot easier. That's when I founded Banky Moon. Still connected? And so Banky Moon set out to be this consulting advisory company that would then go and build technology for the banks and insurance companies and tech companies. But that wasn't my passion. This idea of Bitcoin, again, as you said in the introduction, this money that isn't issued by a central bank. That's really the its primary thing. I remember Zimbabwe. When the currency collapsed.
Yeah.
I've seen how now, especially over the last few years, how expensive it is for people living in South Africa to send money home. Still financial inclusion, although in South Africa it's quite good. A lot of people here in South Africa have access to financial products. Across Africa, less so. So Bitcoin, was always my passion. I wanted to see if we could enable things that weren't possible before, make people's lives better, by reducing the costs to move money, and provide other utilities, like, for example, being able to buy electricity at your home at low cost without having to have a bank account.
Yeah.
So even though Banking Moon was great because it meant that I could focus on the regulatory aspects and the legal aspects, and also just how the technology works, and also making a lot of relationships, especially with government and so on, because this is now a space that is not very regulated. I think regulators are still trying to understand it and see where does it fit. I was involved with many workshops and seminars and conferences with Reserve Bank, with SARS. Speaking to the people that really matter. The people that can really influence how something unfolds in a country.
Yeah.
And by doing that, it meant that I could now demystify it. I could explain to them that it's not this scary thing that drug dealers can use. It's actually the whole point of Bitcoin is to make things transparent, very easily audited, very easily to regulate. It's supposed to be a tool that can actually help with corruption. It's an anti-corruption tool.
Yeah.
So Banking Moon gave me that chance to not just do it locally but internationally as well. Go and explain to governments and organizations and financial organizations, regulators, this is a technology that you guys can benefit from. Obviously, if you're a country that quite likes anonymity, or if you're a corrupt government, then you probably wouldn't like this, because it's not so much people think about Bitcoin being this thing that can enable money launderers and so on, but it actually disables them, because every transaction is transparent, and that means the same for government. If government were to use this, they would have to be transparent. So this is an incredible technology, and that's when I thought, let me found Banking Moon. Let me start Banking Moon. And Banking Moon, the whole point of Banking Moon is to make Bitcoin specifically, because I only believe in Bitcoin, and one day I think it'll be the only one that exists.
I see.
Let me make it easy for people to use. Let me make it so they can easily get it, because everyone always says, I like Bitcoin, but where do I get it?
Yeah.
And I'll tell you how we've done that. Let me make it easy for them to just keep it, because it's very technical and complicated, and the wallets and stuff that exist out there are difficult to use. Let me make it easy, and then more importantly, let me make a place for people to use it. Build payment systems so your local retailer, your local grocer, whatever, can accept Bitcoin as payment. And that's what I've been now trying to do for the last few years.
I see. So I am going to unpack CentB. I just actually want to pick your brain about one thing regarding blockchain. I think it might have been 2017 where Sierra Leone had an election where they used blockchain technology, I think, to, the same type of thing, to make it a safe and secure kind of unriggable election. What do you make of that possibility moving forward? Because there's a lot of countries on the continent that I feel like there's a lack of trust in the electoral commissions, and so do you think that blockchain is a long-term solution there?
Yes, I do. But what you have to now, and when you get into the space, you're going to start seeing that blockchain is not a thing; it is a type of thing. And what we see is that there are many types of blockchains that exist now. And every one of those blockchains is trying to do something different. And so when you say, will blockchain solve this kind of problem? Yes, it will, but it matters what kind. And not only does it matter what kind, but it also matters what the governing principles around that blockchain are. And I'll give you the most important example are the people who are now using that blockchain and in putting it into creating these sorts of ideas around it, are they committed to stability? Now, what do I mean by that? When it comes to technology, everybody is very familiar with this idea that you buy an iPhone this year, next year there's going to be a better iPhone. And one of the things we love about this modern world is that technology constantly improves and evolves, and we keep things getting cheaper, things get better. Now, when it comes to a blockchain, a blockchain is two different things. One is the plan or the idea of it, the design, and then the other part of it is the software implementation or the technical implementation. So, for example, when you build a house, you will take a blueprint and you will then build that house. But it's quite possible to take that blueprint and build that house with different materials or slightly changing the house. Now, a blockchain is exactly the same thing. If you take a blockchain design, you can then implement that blockchain with software. Now, when it comes to blockchain, one of the most important things is that the design, if you want it to be something that lasts for a long time, that people can trust, and you said unriggable. In other words, if you put information onto the blockchain, it cannot change. You must make sure that you are committing to the idea that the design of that blockchain will not change. The software that runs that design, that can change. Of course, as long as it doesn't change the design, it can create functions that are faster, more efficient, work better, and so on, more stable and less bug free. But what we have started to find is that there are groups now out there in the world that use blockchain, and some are committed to the idea that the design must stay set in stone, and others are saying, no, it's fine, we can change the design, as new ideas come along. Now, if we were to create a blockchain that helped with elections, we've got to make sure that the design of that blockchain cannot change. Because what happens if somebody says, okay, it'll be nice if we could have double votes, let's just say. Suddenly you can't trust that blockchain. Now, this has become a reason why I'm telling you this is because what we are seeing now in the world is that there are multiple competing cryptocurrencies and multiple competing blockchains, and all of them are trying to say that they're the best. So how are you going to now discern and figure out which ones will last? Because sure, you can come up with a fancy, thing now, but will it stand the test of time?
Yeah, so I saw a lot of crazy cryptocurrencies a few years back. I remember at some point there was one called Shitcoin.
Ponzi coin and scam coin, and
just the most ridiculous names.
Yes, and there are of course jokes, but there are some very serious blockchains that are trying to be serious and that, but they're not being stable. Now, the reason why I'm telling you this is because we're seeing that even today with Bitcoin itself. Bitcoin there was always Bitcoin, and then suddenly all these different coins started being born. Some of them saying, look, we're faster, we're better, we're this, we're that. And now we have this sort of competitive environment, no problem. But with Bitcoin itself, the people who were Bitcoin advocates, they became divided.
I see.
Because some of them said, we want a Bitcoin that can change. And some said, no, we shouldn't have a Bitcoin that can change. Now what we have is we've got multiple Bitcoins. So it's getting really difficult and complicated for people to now say, well, which one should I invest in? Which one can I use? Which one will be stable? And you can now look at all those Bitcoins and you can say which one of those groups, all those communities, and we've got Bitcoin Cash, we've got Bitcoin Core, which was BTC, and we've got now Bitcoin SV, which is Satoshi's vision. If we were to try and think, well, which one of those should we look to as a serious contender for, the one that survives? Which one of those are stable? Which one of those are committed to an unchanging design that can stand the test of time? And you'll notice that only one of those does it. And that is the one that has decided to stick with the original design of Bitcoin. There was that white paper that was created by Satoshi Nakamoto. And only Bitcoin SV today is the one that is sticking with the original design.
I see. And that's the one that you guys use on CentBee, which you co-founded alongside Angus Brown. For the folks at home, basic breakdown, kind of 30-second pitch, if you will. What is CentBee and how do you operate?
So CentBee is just a Bitcoin payment company. We want to make it easy for people to get Bitcoin, to hold Bitcoin, and to spend Bitcoin. So we've got a wallet, and you can download the wallet today on iPhone or Android. It's called CentBee. And then if you want to, you can now go to any PEP, ShopRite, Checkers, Pick n Pay, Ackermans, Builders Warehouse, Macro, a whole bunch of Flash stores, all those types of places. And you can take your CentBee wallet wallet, and there's an option there to buy Bitcoin. You can go to those retailers and you can say, I want to buy some Bitcoin, please. You create a barcode voucher on the app. You get that scanned as though you were paying a bill.
Oh, yeah.
And you hand over your money, and suddenly, boom, the Bitcoin gets onto your phone. So we've now made it easy for people to get Bitcoin, and it's Bitcoin SV, the original protocol design. And our next product that we are about to release is a cross-border product. So people living here can send money easily home to their relatives and friends and so on. And then finally, our last product is going to be payments. So you can now go to your favorite store and buy something with your Bitcoin.
I see. So you have the stated goal of bringing Bitcoin to Africa. I mentioned the media frenzy back in 2017. Back then, myself, like most people, I think we saw it as something to invest in rather than something to treat as a currency. And this is mainly because at the time it was so volatile, and also I think it was the way that the media was portraying it. But we now have this option to use it for its intended purpose. So the app functions. How does it function so quickly, especially in terms of purchases and payments, given that Bitcoin can be volatile? How are you able to maintain kind of standard rates and that sort of thing?
Yeah, the volatility is an issue that's not going to go away soon, and there's a reason for the price volatility. It starts really with that most people aren't really sure what this thing is. Is it going to survive? Is it going to be made illegal? And most people, when they look at Bitcoin and cryptocurrency, they think it is an investment because they saw how it spiked and went so high.
Yeah.
Everyone was making money, and there's a narrative now that Bitcoin is what's called digital gold, which is a false narrative. People think buy Bitcoin now, don't worry, it's buy it now, and in a year's time you can sell it, buy a house.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, that has created this casino mentality where most people now want to go and gamble, and that's all it is. You go into these exchanges and you buy this currency, buy that currency, like those funny ones you were talking about earlier. Like people will buy them because okay, it's something I can pump and then I can dump it onto a greater fool.
Yeah.
So this is an unfortunate circumstance, with all these different currencies and so on, and that's why it's so volatile, because people are buying and selling and trading, and there are whales out there dumping on you and pumping up the price and so on. Also, we don't know if it's going to be illegal. So as soon as a government or somebody comes out and says, we're going to now regulate exchanges, or we're going to clamp down, then obviously people sell, and the price goes down. If you hear a large retailer is now accepting Bitcoin across the world, then the price will go up. And if Bitcoin was more widely used, and we'll look at Bitcoin specifically, then we wouldn't have this very shallow market. I mean, it's only $100 billion or something, or less. Actually, SV is even less. And it's quite easy, to take $1 million and just really affect the market. So once Bitcoin becomes a lot more widely used, it'll be harder for people to easily manipulate the markets.
I see.
Also, it's good that countries, and South Africa is one of the great countries, if our regulators can start saying, this is what they think, this is their opinion, this is their stance, giving consumers and businesses comfort, confidence that, okay, they're cool with it, we're cool with it, let's now build these products. And it's going to take a while for all countries to do that. I mean, some will be more hostile, some will be more open, but luckily here in South Africa, we've got that perfect environment. We've got regulators that understand what's going on, they're actively looking into it, and also we've got tons of Africans from all over the continent trying to send money home. They have needs, and that's why Bitcoin in South Africa, South Africa, I think even now, if you look at Google Trends, the number one country that comes up when you type Bitcoin is South Africa.
Nice. So we've kind of you've touched on some of the product offerings you have. So to go through it again, is Bitcoin Wallet, and then you have one that's also available for merchants, which I think you mentioned is easy to transact now. You can buy anything you need, and then also we have secure remittance, and that's what you mentioned when you say people sending money back home, correct?
That's right.
Okay, awesome. So naturally, you guys also go to events related to your work. So far this year, so you guys were at Blockchain Africa, Africa Tech Week, Seamless Southern Africa. Apart from showcasing your work, I'm sure you also gain a lot of insight from these events. So in terms of the future of both cryptocurrency and blockchain, are you seeing any trends that you can unpack which might suggest where the industry is going, both in terms of how widespread it's becoming and also the kinds of products and services which are becoming available?
Yeah, so I think the biggest trend and the most significant outcome of of all these things is that in the same way we have one internet, we're going to end up with one blockchain. It just makes sense. If I want to pay you money and you take dollars and I only have rands, now we have to go through a complicated process of exchanging and costs and so on.
Yeah.
It just makes sense in a global world where we have one platform for sharing information, the internet. We have one platform where we can share money, we can pay each other. So I see one day a single blockchain world.
I see.
Which means there's going to be a lot of failures out there. So right now there's an opportunity, I guess, if you want to speculate, to buy and sell on these currencies, but ultimately there'll be one. That's what I believe. Secondly, I think that the one that survives will have these characteristics. It'll be legal. You can't have a blockchain that does things that are outside the law. And one of the things that are outside the law is transacting anonymously. If you're a business and you accept money from somebody, you better have an accounting of that transaction, and you have to, in most cases, know who your customer is.
Yeah.
Plus, you have to do anti-money laundering checks. If somebody's pumping money through your system, washing money, you have to know. So, legality is very important. Anonymous currencies like Monero and Zcash and so on, I don't think. I mean, of course, they might exist in the same way ham radios and so on exist.
Yeah.
But they will never become, global, widespread technology that people use.
I see.
Maybe hobbyists or whatever. Second of all, you can't have a blockchain that allows people to not just transact anonymously, but be able to have marketplaces that can be anonymous. We saw how Silk Road and copycats that have come out now, where people can buy and sell. But they all have a point of failure where there's a server and an administrator and somebody. And that's how these guys got shut down. That's how Silk Road got shut down, through good old-fashioned police work.
Yeah.
But if you create a blockchain that allows that to happen natively, where people can have these decentralized marketplaces, you can be sure that regulators in the world are going to look at this and say, no, we can't accept this, we can't allow this. Again, it's impossible to completely wipe it out, but it's not going to become a widespread thing. And that means no one's going to use it, maybe a few people.
I see.
So it has to be legal. Second of all, it has to be scalable. And that just means it has to be able to be fast, and everybody must be able to use it. And again, if you look at blockchains out there today, some are actively trying to inhibit scale. If you think about the Bitcoin Core or BTC Bitcoin, and this is the Bitcoin that Luno.com, that exchange, that's their currency. That currency, the people who are advocating for Bitcoin BTC, they want to keep Bitcoin small, because for them, Bitcoin is all about not having regulators or anybody shut you down, not being able to, not a government or a law enforcement not being able to come to you. And they think that they can stop law enforcers from shutting you down if everybody gets to run a little computer at home and have the blockchain hosted. And to do that, you have to have the blocks, which are part of the what we call the blockchain. The transactions in those blocks, there can only be a few.
I see.
So they don't want to scale. What they're trying to do is create new technology on top of it, which will allow people to transact in a scalable way. But that's not going to succeed. So the way they already, I can look at Bitcoin BTC and say it's not scaling. It's not going to reach a wide population. Then finally, the point that I try to mention, and the most important point, is stability, where a blockchain has to be set in stone, the design of that blockchain. If you are now using a blockchain and the developers and so on are changing it according to the fashions and whatever, that's not going to succeed. So if anybody's out there is looking at blockchains today, I think that the original Bitcoin, as it was originally devised, which is now traded on exchanges as BSV, that one is scalable. It is legal. It doesn't enable anonymous marketplaces, and it's not anonymous. And finally, it is stable. The people who are supporting BSV are saying we're not going to change the design. So if you were thinking about where's the space going to go, what it's going to look like in the future, in terms of the blockchain, there'll be one, and I think it's going to be the original Bitcoin, according to the original white paper. But then that's just money. You talked about voting earlier.
Yeah.
There's going to be all sorts of use cases. In fact, this is what I think is going to ultimately be, that the Bitcoin blockchain one day will be the internet.
Oh.
And everything that you do, your podcasts, whatever it is that you are your information, you're going to post it to Bitcoin. And that means that the monetization strategy, because right now your monetization is probably advertising.
Yeah.
You hope to get enough people. You go to the advertiser and say, I've got so many millions of views, which I'm sure you do.
Yeah.
And they'll say, okay, fine, we'll pay you to advertise on you.
Yeah.
Well, if you have the internet on the Bitcoin blockchain, it means that every time somebody wants to access your information or get your podcast or whatever, they're going to have to pay you for it. Right now, everyone thinks the internet is free. I can just do anything I like there. But there is a hidden cost there when it comes to advertising and so on.
Yeah.
I think one day the whole internet will be on the Bitcoin blockchain. And people won't monetize through advertising. They will monetize directly from consumers.
I see.
If somebody wants to hear your podcast, they pay you a tiny microtransaction. And you will earn more money from your consumers paying you 10 cents, 20 cents, a rand, 5 rand, whatever it is they want, more money than what the advertisers will pay you. So I think that one day the whole internet will be Bitcoin blockchain.
I see. So last year, research group nChain took an equity stake in CentBee, and then this year you received further funding worth about £1 million, which is 18.3 million rand thereabouts, from an entrepreneur, Calvin Ayer, if I'm saying that correctly. And funnily enough, you guys connected with him through nChain. So in terms of CentBee in the short to medium term future, what does that funding mean? Is it expansion? Is it improved infrastructure? That sort of thing?
Yeah, so the first round was what's called seed money, where you have an idea, you have a prototype, you go to somebody and say, hey, look, this is a great idea. What do you think? And they give you enough money to kind of flesh out your prototype and start getting some customers and so on. We did that. And then what happened was we were approached by Calvin Ayer, or Ayer Media. He has a media company called CoinGeek, and they produce a Bitcoin related news content. And we got the Series A. So Series A is sort of the first round of funding, really, where an investor comes in and says, right, let's grow this business. So we're now in that growth phase. We are hiring more people, and obviously we're going to be spending more money on marketing, but our products need to be completed, our merchant point of sale and so on. And we're going to be using that for that. And also, CentBee, even though we're based here, we are an international company. Most of our users come from places like Turkey and India and so on.
I see.
So we are definitely going to want to start expanding, like, our voucher products and our merchant point of sales and so on, globally. We're very lucky here, again, to be in South Africa, because we get to live in this beautiful place. I love South Africa so much.
Same.
And we now have a global market, a global audience, and we're certainly going to be, pushing that. And I really believe, we'll be another, South African success story, where a significant, Bitcoin-related tech startup emerges out of Africa. And I'm very excited to be able to do that. That's my dream, is to let the world look at Africa and say, look, there are innovative tech companies that can change this world that come out of Africa.
Awesome. So before we end off, I just want to kind of ask a question explicitly and see what your response will be. So in a blog post on your site, your co-founder stated the following: modern financial systems are possibly the most complex, non-deterministic creations of humankind. Governments are challenged by Bitcoin because they have a very limited ability to control the technology. Now, I understand, as you've mentioned, that the SARB locally is relatively open to the idea of cryptos, but moving forward, and as it becomes more mainstream, is government oversight and regulation something to be feared or welcomed?
I think welcomed. Of course, in a free market, companies can be regulated by that market. If you have a company that's unethical or selling scam items or whatever, of course, for the free market, and that's why I like capitalism, will wean them out. But of course, you need. There are still bad elements out there, and what regulation does is it just makes sure that the companies serving the customers aren't doing anything behind the scenes. If there's any dodginess going on, a regulator should be able to discover that. For example, we've got exchanges now in the world, Bitcoin exchanges, that are not regulated, and we're seeing now there's a big exchange, Bitfinex, that's now being embroiled in this big scandal where they had user funds linked to a cryptocurrency called Tether, but now where's the money? Now, if they were regulated, we would have been able to audit them and see that they actually have those funds. So regulation, is vital when it comes to catching the bad elements. But more than that, it gives customers confidence. You know, if I say, look, I'm a shady exchange and I'm not regulated, people will have less, desire to work with me. But if I say, I'm being audited, my technology is being checked and so on, then of course customers will be more likely to use me. So we are very strong advocates of regulation. We want the Reserve Bank to in their best way they can give us a stamp of approval, and then we can show that off. But more than that, we want them to see that this is not a technology that is out of their control. Of course, the internet isn't under their control, but they can make perfect use of it. Same with this. This is a technology that will enable them. It will enable them to do better regulation. It will enable the taxman to collect taxes more efficiently. Here's an example. If I go to the shop and I buy something, what happens is that the merchant will take a transaction, and then what happens is they do an accounting. They then give those records to the tax man, and then there's this whole thing that goes on. Well, imagine if every time you went to a store and you paid for something, a little bit of money went directly to SARS directly at that point. That's really efficient. And also, if SARS were suspicious about you and wanted to audit you, they wouldn't have to say, please give me your books. They can just go to the blockchain and say, all right, let's check it ourselves. So when I said that Bitcoin, specifically the original design of Bitcoin, because other Bitcoins don't do this and other currencies don't do it, the whole point of Bitcoin was to become a technology that regulators, law enforcers, tax authorities could have oversight on, and they could understand perfectly what's going on. And that's what regulators want. They want oversight. Even our Reserve Bank wants oversight. This can enable that for them. And the more they realize this, the more they learn about this, eventually, and here's another prediction, one day they will insist that you use Bitcoin. They won't tolerate it, but they say, look, if you're a business, we want to see your blockchain records. We want to make sure that you are transacting legitimately. And they will enforce it. They'll say, please use Bitcoin. That's my prediction.
Awesome. I love these predictions that are being thrown out. I'm going to listen back and throw them on Twitter for you guys just to get your opinions. But how can our listeners find you guys online? How can they join Centbee?
So centbee.com, that's our website. At Centbee is our Twitter handle. Centbee on the app stores. Please go and download it and try it out, and even go and to the local retailer that you have and just see what it's like to buy some Bitcoin and have it. I think once you have it, and that's what I'm going to send some Bitcoin to you right now. You're going to see how easy it is, and how quick and how efficient. And once it's in your hands, and once you've looked at it and felt it, suddenly all the mystique around it falls away, and you're like, I got this. It's easy.
I see. So there you have it, folks. In the ever-evolving world of money, you don't want to be blindsided by the future, especially when it's been staring you in the face all this time. I remember 2017, and I understand how many people are still disillusioned by the idea of cryptocurrency. But trust me when I say you should believe the hype. And one more thing, don't touch me on my blockchain. But I'd like to thank my guest for pulling through. Remember, he's the co-founder and CEO of Centbee, Lauren Gamarov. Thanks for joining me on The Grind.
Thank you very much.
So stay tuned to the hottest digital radio station in the nation. I've got another great interview lined up for you just after the break. I'll see you on the other side.
Pump up the volume for the best vibes.
This is the dopest, bro. Non-stop.
Touch HD.